Picture this, a single photograph, a tweet just tossed out into the digital ether, and then, boom. Within days, it racks up 288,000 views and sets off an absolute firestorm online. We're not talking about a political scandal here or some viral pop culture meme. No, it was just a simple photo of a Catholic priest, Father James Altman, visiting a movie set back in early May. But, this wasn't just any movie set. And, as we're about to see in this explainer, the reactions to this one picture reveal a fascinating intersection of faith, Hollywood, and our modern cultural divides.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into a very specific piece of source material. It's a recent, totally fascinating interview from the John Henry Weston channel. In it, Father Altman gives us a first-hand, on-the-ground dispatch from the highly anticipated and honestly already super debated sequel to The Passion of the Christ, directed by Mel Gibson. We're going to unpack Altman's observations, his really staunch defense of the director, and how he clapped back at the critics who flooded that viral tweet.
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll check out the set of the resurrection. Second, we'll look at Altman's view of Mel Gibson. Third, pushing back on the critics. Fourth, defending the priestly blessing. And finally, we'll wrap up with the upcoming LifeSite News Banquet.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, on set of the resurrection. So Altman actually traveled all the way to the heel of Italy, right down in the lower right-hand corner of the map, spending 3 days on set right at the tail end of production. He describes this absolutely grueling schedule. We're talking 14-hour days for the crew. But the thing that really struck him, the level of historical immersion. He paints this picture of a set where you feel completely transported back in time 2,000 years. The actors were just so deeply in character. And it wasn't even just the main cast, because characters like Peter were family men. There were literally little kids running around the set, all perfectly costumed, totally integrated into this incredibly authentic first-century world. And the sheer timeline for an epic project like this, it's pretty staggering. According to the interview, filming actually started way back in October in various parts of Italy, including around Rome. Altman arrived in May, just in time to witness literally the very last shot of this phase of production. The source notes that the project is now moving into the editing phase, potentially up in Canada. As for the ultimate goal, well, the film is expected to drop in 2 parts, with the first part slated for March 2027, strategically timed right around Lent or Easter. Moving on to Section 2, Altman's view of Gibson.
Now, this brings us to a highly subjective but super important theme of the interview. Mel Gibson is, without question, a controversial figure, right? He's got a very public history of past mistakes. But Father Altman firmly asserts a totally different perspective based on his first-hand experience. He describes Gibson as a faithful, incredibly humble man whose heart is, quote, full of repentance for anything he's done in the past. Actually, Altman goes as far as to say he wishes everyone had that same profound sense of repentance. He doesn't see Gibson as some arrogant Hollywood elite, but really as a servant to others who just doesn't put on airs.
So you might be wondering, what does that humility actually look like in practice? Well, when pressed for a specific example during the interview, Altman shared a really striking anecdote. Picture this. Gibson had recently undergone an operation, so he has one arm in a sling. He's temporarily invalid, dealing with the massive stress of directing a huge movie. Suddenly, a guest arrives at the monitors and needs a place to sit. Now, instead of asking one of the dozens of able-bodied assistants around, or even asking Altman himself to grab a chair, Gibson just silently gets up, he walks down a set of stairs, grabs a heavy chair with his one good arm, drags it all the way back up the steps for the guest, and then just immediately goes right back to directing like it was no big deal. For Altman, that simple, physical act of putting someone else's comfort above his own, that told him everything he needed to know about the director's character.
But that humility definitely didn't mean a lack of cinematic rigor. At one point, it took 12 full takes to get one specific scene right. Altman watched as Gibson directed a scene that just wasn't landing the way it needed to. And keep in mind, this is at the end of a grueling 14-hour day. Everyone is exhausted. But with the whole weight of the production on his shoulders, Gibson didn't lose his temper, not at all. Instead, he patiently called the actors in, carefully explaining exactly what he wanted to convey. Altman, who was watching this all unfold on the 4 monitor screens, noted that Gibson handled the whole exhausting process with just immense grace and patience.
Which leads us to Section 3, pushing back on critics. So here is the core conflict of the whole situation. On one side, you have the historical and ongoing concerns from critics regarding anti-Semitism and Gibson's past mistakes. When The Passion of the Christ originally came out, a lot of bishops and commentators expressed deep worry about these issues. But on the flip side, Altman draws a really hard line. He argues that the film is simply an accurate portrayal of what happened to Jesus at the hands of the Sanhedrin and the crowds. He even suggests that anyone worried about a realistic depiction of Christ's sacrifice really shouldn't call themselves Christian. On top of that, he deflects the criticism of Gibson's past by pointing a finger straight back at the church hierarchy. He argues that bishops who covered up abuse have absolutely no moral high ground to criticize the mistakes of a layperson who has shown such profound repentance. Altman actually anchors this whole defense in theology, specifically referencing the parable of the talents. He suggests that God gave Mel Gibson a very specific, immense talent for acting and directing. And in Altman's view, Gibson is utilizing those God-given talents beautifully, enduring all the pressure and the suffering to create something that honors God and, specifically, the Blessed Mother, who Altman notes is portrayed absolutely magnificently in this new film.
All right, moving to Section 4, defending the priestly blessing.
Remember that viral photo we talked about? Well, when it blew up, a wave of what Altman calls negative Nancys flooded the comments, questioning his status and his right to even be on that set. Altman uses this interview to set the record completely straight regarding his own standing. He firmly declares, quote, "I am a priest. I am not excommunicated." He really emphasizes that he has the authority to bless anybody, anywhere, anytime. In fact, during his visit, he was given the incredible privilege of offering the final Holy Mass for the production and blessing the cast and crew right before the very last take of the film.
And this leads Altman to pose a pretty pointed rhetorical question to his detractors. Who can possibly complain about someone giving a blessing? To highlight his frustration with the online attacks, he draws a sharp partisan line. He claims that the very people criticizing his traditional blessing on a movie set are the exact same people who support controversial modern church figures, specifically naming James Martin and his blessings of homosexual couples.
And finally, Section 5, upcoming LifeSite News Banquet.
For those of you following the broader network surrounding this interview, the source also shared some key details about an upcoming LifeSite News celebratory banquet. It's scheduled for the evening of September 24th in St. Louis, Missouri. The occasion? They're celebrating the historic beatification of Archbishop Fulton Sheen. The event promises a lineup of special guests, including Bishop Joseph Strickland, Terry Barber, and Peter Howard. And notably, attendees will actually have the opportunity to venerate Bishop Sheen's own favorite mitre. It's a logistical addition at the end of the interview for sure, but one that's clearly targeted at their shared audience. Which brings us to our final takeaway. Think about it. We started with a single, simple photo, generating hundreds of thousands of views, and journeyed through a landscape of grueling film production, deep personal redemption narratives, and fierce theological pushback. It begs a really fascinating question. How does a single film production become such a massive lightning rod for faith, controversy, and modern cultural commentary? If nothing else, this interview proves that the resurrection is going to be far more than just a movie. It's already a battleground of ideas. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the deeper narratives behind the headlines.